This is
Make it plain.
Make it plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make it plain.
Get woke.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's that time of the month. The new jobs report is out. We're going to talk about it, as always, with the chief economist at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, centeronbudget.org. He is the chief economist. He's bad. He's Chad Stone, everyone. How are you, man?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. Always great to see you.
Good. Yeah, you too.
So not the 500,000 that, but I don't really know, honestly, who really was expecting that. I didn't hear anybody say, oh, we're going to get 500,000, considering everything we're dealing with.
Well, that was the so-called consensus, whatever that means among forecasters. But a lot of people were willing to take the under, and I was sort of thinking of the under, not willing to bet.
Yeah.
But yeah, 169,000. That was much lower than anyone expected, actually.
Yeah.
And it's true that there were revisions to the previous 2 months, and on average, we've added 561,000 jobs a month. So that's another thing that put that figure in people's head, I think.
Yeah.
This year we've added 561 a month on average. But
right.
Some months 1 million, and some months 169,000.
Right. It's going to be like that. Now,
I'm sorry, 194,000. It's the revision. It's
right.
The revisions that were 169,000 that got added to it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, the administration is touting that the unemployment rate has gone down, but you always sober us with the U6 and what that means, and that is sometimes more of a reflection of what joblessness is. Correct?
Yeah, the U6 measure takes into account people who are not officially unemployed because they haven't looked for work recently, but they're classified as marginally attached to the labor force because they have looked in the past year, and they could well take a job if offered, but they're not actively looking. And it also includes people who are working what's called part-time for economic reasons, meaning they're not getting as many hours as they would like, so they are underemployed. So U6 is a measure of unemployment plus underemployment, and that's higher. Although that's come down as well. I forget the U6 number off the top of my head. It's in the tweet thread, like something like 12.5.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, the
yes.
Now I'm looking. If what you have here, official unemployment rate of 4.8%, folks, you should always read Chad's thread too at Chad CBPP at Chad CBPP. Official unemployment rate of 4.8% understates joblessness.
Right.
More realistic UR is 7.4%.
Yeah.
When workers misclassified as working rather than unemployed in the survey from which UR is estimated, plus exits from the labor force. I was watching someone on television earlier say that this is very real in the sense that, especially amongst women, because childcare is still a challenge and more of a challenge in the middle of this pandemic, a lot of women just stopped.
Right.
So that probably adds to that more realistic number, doesn't it?
Yes. So the U6 measure, we talked about that in past recessions, and we haven't paid as much attention to it this time because of this focus on the and I put it in quotations, the more realistic rate. And it's as you described it. It's the official unemployment rate, plus there's a little bit of misclassification of people in the survey. People answered the question, or the surveyors didn't follow up properly in getting an answer, where some people who should have been counted as unemployed were counted as employed, and that's a smaller piece of it. But the bigger piece is what you're talking about, which is people who, the fact that labor force participation is much lower than it would have than it would be in a normal strong labor market. So because of the pandemic, and because especially for women, as you say, or parents of children, sometimes it's the father who stays home, but mostly it's the woman who stays home, the mother who stays home. Those people are not actively looking for work, even though they're not in the labor force, but they would be if the pandemic were not holding things back, and if childcare responsibilities were not holding them back. If daycare was open, it was easier issue with schools. So excess leaving the labor force because of all these factors, because the labor force is people who are actually working and people who are actively looking for work, who've looked for work in the last 4 weeks. And a lot of people who would like to be working aren't searching, therefore they're not, because of the reasons we're talking about, and others. Some out of discouragement, but
now as we look at some of the unemployment rates as well. Well, first let me say this: we've talked a lot about the hospitality industry. You cite very little change in eating and drinking places employment due to virus. That's a reality. Public education hiring, low public education hiring also kept the numbers down too, correct?
Right. So leisure and hospitality we've talked about a lot over the course of the recovery. That was a sector where the most jobs were lost, and that was women and workers of color working in leisure and hospitality industry who lost jobs. Now they came back halfway pretty quick, and it's been a little more sluggish coming back. But the comeback in leisure and hospitality has put people back to work and closed the jobs deficit. But in the last 2 months, leisure and hospitality growth has come exclusively or almost exclusively from entertainment, sports, recreation, and not from eating and drinking establishments, because the virus, especially the Delta variant, has held back eating and drinking, even though it's up more than it used to be, but it's still discouraged. And education, state and local education. In September, there should have been a big jump, because that's the normal time when people are coming back to schools. But the hiring in schools has been messed up by the pandemic. The pattern has been messed up, and so not as many people showed up as coming back to work in September in state and local education, and so that was a drag because it was lower than expected. So those two things are pretty big factors contributing to the particularly low.
More MIP after this message. 4.5 million people were working part-time for economic reasons in September, meaning they were involuntarily working fewer hours than they would have liked. That is down from a peak of 10.9 million in April of 2020, but still 70,000 higher than in February of 2020.
Right. Almost any indicator you look at has improved greatly from April of 2020, which was the depths of the recession, to now. But almost every one of them, almost any indicator you look at, is still not back to where it was in February of 2020 before the pandemic. So we still have a ways to go. And of course, the economy, or at least the population, has been growing over that time. The working age population has been growing. So you'd actually have to do better than just get back to where you were in February 2020 to be back to true full employment. But there was some good news in the household data about the fact that there's substantial growth in the number of people with jobs and a substantial decline in the number of unemployed. Now, the number of unemployed, the decline in the number of unemployed was larger than the number of than the growth in employment. So that means some of those unemployed people were not staying in the labor force, but had dropped out. But most of them were, and we did see a pickup in the share of the population with a job, which is a good thing. It's the highest it's been since March of 2020. And so some things are moving in the right direction And even though the headline jobs number, it was very disappointing, some of the stuff on the household side is encouraging.
Yeah.
Especially the rise in the share of the population with a job.
What impact? What let me. You mentioned unemployment. Let me do this first. You're right. Number of long-term unemployed fell to 2.7 million, but still well over 2 times higher than the 1.1 million in February of 2020.
Right.
And here, obviously, you would also make the argument, how we really need to update, improve, and overhaul the unemployment system anyway, right?
Right. Yes, for sure. That might be something that we need to keep putting pressure on policymakers to do after all the big push on current, especially if they have to cut back on what they're doing politically to get something passed. I mean, I still think we're going to get a good package between the infrastructure and the Build Back Better helping people over the long run, but it's under political pressure. But yeah, unemployment insurance made a really huge difference in the depths of the recession in helping out an awful lot of people. But all of the federal programs are basically gone now. And state unemployment insurance systems are, in many cases, really bad. A small proportion of the people who lose their jobs through no fault of their own, which is who are supposed to get unemployment insurance. You don't get it if you quit, but if you lose your job through no fault of your own, you should qualify for unemployment insurance. Not enough do. States don't provide adequate benefits. A lot of states don't provide sufficient weeks of unemployment insurance.
Yeah. That's troubling. We also, not a lot of change when it comes to the low wage workers being disproportionately affected when it comes to job losses. The largest are in the low wage industries.
Right. If you look at industries by the average wages that they pay and you rank them by employment. So private sector jobs before the recession in February of 2020, low wage workers made up a third of the jobs. When you divide into three groups of roughly equal size, but they're 56% of the job losses, of the private sector job losses since February 2020. So they got hit much harder than the middle third or the upper third of industries, according to wages.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to education for a minute. You would have thought, or we would have thought, wouldn't we, that education would come in a lot stronger since schools are reopening, but it actually hasn't come in as strong. Why is that? I wonder.
Part of it is a statistical issue having to do with the complicated and boring topic of seasonal adjustment. We know that there's going to be every September there's going to be a big jump in employment in education. And if we're trying to discern trends, we want to take out the normal seasonal factors. And so the data that usually gets reported is seasonally adjusted data that smooths out known seasonal patterns so they can detect the underlying trend. But in the pandemic, nothing's been normal. So the fluctuations in education and employment have not looked like the fluctuations in previous seasons. And yet seasonal adjustment factors are being applied to try to smooth it out and detect a trend. So some of it is an artifact of trying to serve one purpose rather than another, trying to talk about trends rather than to count the actual number of people, because it can be misleading. If one were to look at a time series of non-seasonally adjusted data over several years, it would spike up at the same time every year and break down at the same time in every year, and it'll be noisy. And the seasonal adjustment smooths that out. But in unusual circumstances, that can produce results that aren't telling the true picture of what's going on. Now, it's probably still the case that everything's not back to normal with education hiring, but it's probably not as bad as the official data suggests.
Yeah.
But we don't know.
Percent change in number of jobs, February 2020 to September 2021. Low wage, negative 5.3, medium wage, negative 3.2%, high wage, 0.8%. and
Plus
3.1.
gain.
I'm sorry.
A gain, right?
Yeah, right. Right. All industries negative 3.1%. So just to kind of give everyone an idea of what's going on there.
More MIP after this message.
In terms of, and we touched on this as well, Black and Hispanic women likelier to lose jobs in this crisis from February 2020 to September 2021. Black women negative 4.6%. And that number was, when we first started looking at this, that number was almost double
Right.
a couple of months ago. So it is coming down, but the question still is, why is it so high? At this hour, Hispanic women have surpassed the Black women in terms of losses, negative 4.8%. They've usually been pretty close together, but that's very real. So all these things still ongoing. We want to also acknowledge the education piece too, and folks, go to @ChadCBPP to see all of this. Workers without a bachelor's degree have experienced the largest job losses. Same period of time, February 2020, September 2021. Less than high school, negative 7.9%. High school, no college, negative 6.3%. Some college down 5.3%. Bachelor's and above up 0.7%, plus 0.7%. So, people obviously who are in low wage industries, who are minorities, particularly women, and who don't have as much education, are suffering. But just to update on one other category, foreign-born workers have experienced largest job losses. For those native-born to this country, negative 2.4%. That's been the loss. Foreign-born, negative 3.2%. Now, when it comes to women, again, heavily impacted. Native-born women are negative 3.4%, but foreign-born women 4.6%. So again, women of color without education beyond high school, these are the ones that are still being hit the hardest. I guess the other thing to wonder about, Chad, is what impact, if any, the come back to work with vaccination mandate may or may not be having. I don't know who's culling that information, but have you thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that employers were ordered to do what they wanted to do, which is require workers to be vaccinated. That's good in the long run because that will bring people back. I don't know about the different. It's bigger employers that have to do that. So and a lot of the workers we've been talking about are working for smaller employers in some cases. So I don't really know. I haven't really looked at those data. I haven't figured out how to put all that together. But I mean, the virus is still driving the economy. It's not the same in every geographical area. There are places where it's not so bad and places where it's still very bad, and that has a lot to do with some of the policy. But that matters. But we've been talking about various subgroups and the racial composition and the racial effects. I wanted to point out that if we look at just overall white, Black, Hispanic, and Asian unemployment, the Black unemployment rate actually fell from 8.8 to 7.9% in this month. Now there's some jumping around because of small samples, but so that's the good side. That's a significant improvement. 7.9, of course, is still way too high and higher than anybody else, and higher than white, Black, white, Hispanic, or Asian.
Yeah. 7.9%. What's the white unemployment rate?
So white unemployment rate in the month fell from 4.5 to 4.2. So in August it was 4.5, in September it's 4.2.
Yeah. As always, there just seems to be a baked-in formula in America. The Black unemployment rate is always twice the white or close to twice. That's just a fixed number. It goes up and down, but it's never
Right.
It's rarely much less than twice. So, but that's a whole nother thing we've got to figure out. One other statistic I want to raise right now: prime age population with a job, and those are numbers that are still not great. I just had it in front of me, and the computer wants to do something different. But since comparing February and today, we're still talking about the disproportionality of this, and how and folks, we talk about the prime population. We're talking about people between the ages of 25 and 54, correct?
That's correct.
Racial and ethnic disparities in share of prime age population with a job. In February for African Americans, it was a 75.9. It is now 73.5. For Hispanics, 78% in February, 74.9 today. For whites, 81.5% in February, 79.2% today. So again, it's still disproportionately affecting Black and Hispanic workers.
Right. So the white rate is always higher, and the employment to population ratio is a high number is a positive thing. A higher percentage of the population has jobs, and the gap between white and Black, or white and Hispanic, has, what am I trying to say? There is a gap in percentage point terms. It's wider now than it was in February of 2020, but not as wide as it was in the depths of the recession. But the bottom line is, as with almost everything, every employment statistic you look at through a racial equity lens, there's a lot of improvement that needs to be made.
So before we go, two things that I like to think about. As the school year progresses, might there be some of these education jobs kind of trickling back, or is school open and that's pretty much it? I mean, I don't know if we have any way to know that.
Well, I think the statistics will probably show some coming back, because we won't have the confusion of the seasonal adjustment factor that I talked about earlier. So it'll be the seasonal adjustment factors will be smaller in the fall, and so we'll get a truer read on what the trend is, and I would expect that it's going to come up. I would think that the factors that we talked about earlier are suppressing the statistical reporting of education jobs in the state and local governments, but we'll see.
Okay.
But if I went out on a limb, I would say that there are analytical reasons and statistical reasons to think that it'll look better, and that'll be a more accurate picture.
Second question, or last question, I should say. And I know we're just in October, but I also wanted to chat. Normally the holiday season creates more jobs and job growth, but with the pandemic, we probably don't know about that either. It's probably too early to figure that out too.
I came across, just in passing, came across some observations that holiday hiring plans seem to not be as strong as in past years. Now, plans are not necessarily actual actions, but it sounds like retailers and I guess producers of stuff that would be sold at holiday time, they're probably expecting it's not going to be as good, but we'll see. Certainly, nobody's predicting gangbusters this holiday season.
Yeah. When now that we're talking about it out loud, let's be honest. Even people are more spoiled than ever before doing online shopping because of COVID, right?
Right.
And so that's probably going to be it. And people are probably not going to be rushing to get back out as comfortable as they got with online shopping. I just, thought about that as we were talking about it. Even folks who weren't into it are now into it. So that's something to think about as well. But, of course, we're all curious too about the vaccine mandates and see what that yields and just what happens there. Folks, Chad Stone always does an excellent job breaking down the monthly jobs report numbers. Strongly encourage you to check out his Twitter at Chad CBPP for the Center on Budget and Policy Priority, centeronbudget.org as well. Chad Stone is the chief economist at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. Chad, as always, buddy, thank you.
You're welcome. Good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you too, man. Thanks.
Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. Please remember to listen, like, and wherever you get your podcasts, please give the show a 5-star rating. And please do spread the word. Let's all continue to pray for each other during this pandemic and this police-demic. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.